All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Obscuracast. We are on episode 14, and today, as always, I have my usual co-host with me, Dan O'Neill. Good evening, sir. How are we doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I know that we had a topic that's been on your mind for a little bit, and we wanted to sort of get into something. We've done a bunch of paranormal stuff. We've done a lot of stuff with secret conspiracies, and this sort of ties in with like a conspiracy theory and like different types of looking at different types of like folklore and things like that. So what we wanted to get into was, I know you wanted to get into some piracy stuff. So this evening we're going to talk about the Golden Age of Piracy. And there's really like about 5 individuals. One is a pairing that we're going to talk about that sort of laid the framework, of what a pirate actually is. And like I said, there's 5 different individuals. They sort of have their own 5 stories. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah. And there's a lot of like myths and like, I don't know, stories that just paint pirates as a certain thing, and they really weren't that for the most part. So, it's fun. It's fun.
So a lot of it's basically folklore, and we're going to sort of get into the nitty gritty of what, like, based on the sort of the research that you and I did, what sort of these 5 individuals, and like I said, one is a pairing, so 4 individuals and 1 pairing, what they were really about, sort of what history tells us versus folklore or myth, basically is what we're going to be getting into. But first, just to lay the framework of where these, individuals came from, not just the individuals that we're going to talk about, but the pirate aspect or pirate philosophy as a whole was, and sort of what the foundation of them, because they're basically rebels, right? They're basically people that forego the law and basically pillaged and ravaged and sort of made their own money and their own way of life. So it's like you said before, it's interesting, it's fun. I didn't know a lot about it before we started doing the research, but as I sort of delved into it, it became kind of another rabbit hole, which is obviously pertaining to what the show's about. So
yeah, and like what's really interesting is a lot of these guys, they were like high up naval officers and like, got contracts from Britain to go ahead and if they ran into any, Spanish ships or anything like that, like go ahead and plunder them. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, yeah, we don't just want the Spanish ships. And like, it's funny how they're all like military guys. Not all,
so they
but
were
a lot
like,
of them.
basically they were brandished as like an extension of the state to go out and do the dirty work is basically what you're getting at.
Yeah, they're basically buccaneers, which a lot of people think buccaneers and pirates are the same thing. Definitely not.
Well, then you get into the whole privateer thing too, which we're going to talk about. Yep. Like, there's a lot of different faces that like these people wore, I guess, upholding the law versus not upholding it. They sort of made their own way. Like, but go ahead. I just wanted to sort of give that context.
Oh yeah, that's pretty much what I was getting at. Is just like, there's a lot that goes into it than more than just like, oh, a buccaneer and a pirate's the same thing.
Yeah, there's a little bit. It's a little bit more. It's a little bit more in the weeds for sure.
Yeah.
So
also
like
very
I said,
interesting that.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say very like interesting that like they have like we'll get into it obviously, but like a code of ethics and like laws and like a lot like you go to the Caribbean, because growing up I was very lucky growing up to where I have traveled a lot of the Caribbean, and everywhere we went like Blackbeard was there or Captain Kidd or like a lot of these pirates are there. So I've seen a lot of this stuff and heard from the locals and been to some of the forts, which is really cool. So it's really interesting.
So like the sort of the foundational framework that we were talking about was sort of like the idea or the context behind why they became what they were and what they were in folklore and all that kind of stuff, blown out of proportion, what have you. So obviously there was a lot of naval brutality back in those days. That was the main form of transportation if you weren't on land. Obviously, I would have to believe that it was like a horse and carriage type situation. But like if you're on the water, obviously you're either in like a really, really like simple rowboat, or you're on one of these like massive galleons that either the naval forces had, or they commandeered, like I said, with the pirate thing where they commandeered and it became their ship, that kind of thing. So it also had a lot of like trade value as far as what they were able to do with the water trade and the East India Company and all that kind of stuff. So the naval brutality, I'm wondering if what we saw with they were referencing the fact that, if somebody was doing something they weren't supposed to, they were met with not just brutality, but like violence. That's basically what you and I saw for the most part. So if somebody was doing something they weren't quote unquote supposed to do, they were met with a lot of hostility versus like a due process or like a trial, that kind of thing. It was just sort of go time, if that makes sense.
So I don't know, have you ever heard the term like the law of the water or
I
law
have
of the
not heard of
sea?
that.
Like,
Enlighten me.
so it's like there were like the rules on the ocean had different rules than on land, essentially. That's kind of what that entails. So, like, if you broke the rules on sea, basically, whoever ship you were on, that captain was the, police. He was the judge.
I'm going to
He
say
was
judge,
the
executioner, the whole bit.
priest, executioner. He was basically essentially God at that point. So, like, if you broke rules, it was up to his or her discretion. So, definitely more brutal. Like, some of these pirates, like, they would cut off guys' ears and noses and hang them up in rafters and stuff. Like, it was brutal from the military standpoint of just being out there and like what happened. A lot of these guys were treated like absolute shit by their naval office, like the naval like captains and stuff. So like I think a lot of them just got sick and tired of being kicked around like a fucking rag doll and treated like shit. And they're like, "Fuck you."
Yeah, do
You
you think
know?
that's why do you think that's why the mutiny and stuff of going to the pirate life was so, I guess, like it was something that was sort of a lure, like it was a freedom, like a freedom thing, like where they didn't have to abide by anything
Definitely.
except for like what was going on the ship.
Definitely, because like I got this book. It's called Black Flags, Blue Waters: The Epic History of America's Most Notorious Pirates. Just started it. I think I'm like 20 pages in. Like the very beginning of the book, it talks about how this crew that was, they were in Jamaica and they were leaving for to go to the east coast of Africa to go pick up slaves because, as most people know, like what the biggest product in the Caribbean is, right? For exporting, especially at that time. Do you know what it is? Well, so if they took over a ship that had a shit ton of slaves, if they took over a slave ship, one of two things happened. Either they captured them and then the pirates would sell them, okay? Or they would let them become part of their crew.
Sort of like they were the rounded out crew that, because
Yeah.
they were living in like they almost called it in the documentary watch, they called it like a failed state, like an impoverished nation. So
Well,
essentially
yeah.
what the
Yep.
piracy was offering them was a life outside of that where they could have a day's work. They would be a part of something bigger than themselves, aka the crew. They would have somebody to look up to in the captain that had, however much money or wealth to his name, plus the notoriety aspect and all that kind of stuff. So I get why it was enticing to somebody in that predicament. I totally get
Well,
that.
but the reason why slaves were so important was because the biggest export of the Caribbean was sugarcane. And the working conditions for these slaves in Jamaica and the Caribbean was horrible. From what I've read so far, and this book is by Eric J. Dolan, he said that the working conditions were so bad that they were losing so many slaves per day that they couldn't bring enough in. And if they couldn't keep up with the amount of slave deaths with new slaves, new workers, it would crash the Jamaican economy. So, aka also like Caribbean economy. So anyway, this ship takes off from the Kingston Harbor in Jamaica. You're like 100 miles out to sea, and these guys on this ship that are just the salesmen, they're getting treated like shit from the captain and his like right hand man. And they actually created a coup and a mutiny. And middle of the night, they went into the captain's quarters, drug him out of his cabin, and they threw him overboard. And according to the story, he clung onto the side of the mast, and I guess they like cut his arm off and he fell into the ocean. Then they went and they got his right hand man and they threw him into the ocean as well and overtook the ship, and then they headed up towards Boston.
Jesus.
Boom. Yeah. Yeah. And
Quick
that's
quick
early
turnaround.
on. Quick turnaround. Yeah. Absolutely. And then they started taking more ships. Like, it was really interesting just to like see that basically, yeah, it was like guys that just were super sick and tired of being treated like shit, that hated their captains and were like this. So
Yeah, so I know you touched on the pirate codes. This sort of goes with the mutiny thing and the voting and the equal shares. So one could almost say, like, if you're talking about voting and equal share, it's almost like they think they even mentioned in the documentary that we watched that it was kind of like their own sort of formal democracy. Like everybody had a
mm-hmm.
say, everybody got the equal share. I know that there was also like limb. So like if
Mm-hmm.
you had like a limb cut off or something versus like losing an eye, it was worth so much
Yeah, I
as
think your
like a
right arm was
as
worth like 800,
it was whatever the
not
currency was.
shilling.
I can't remember
Pieces of
exactly
eight.
what they
Pieces of
Yeah,
eight.
yeah, yeah,
Pieces
exactly.
of eight. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of interesting that like it was kind of like a disability clause. You
Yeah.
know what
Did
I
you
mean?
notice
Like, we
that?
get like our 401k and like our disability payments for work and stuff, and that was like their version of a disability clause or a disability claim. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, because you know why? You want to know why that probably happened? Because those guys got fucked over and seen their guys in the military get fucked over and not get paid for losing their limbs. And they said, fuck this. We're going to make sure that if you lose an arm or a finger or an eye, which did you catch the price that it was if you lost your finger and an eye? They were both the same price.
Yeah, it's actually crazy. Yeah, that was a little weird. Yeah, that didn't make much sense to me. I would like to think that
A
an eye would be worth more than a finger,
little
but
bit more than a finger.
but you're losing something regardless, but I would have to believe that I would rather live without a finger than an eye. Like, that's not even a question for me.
Which finger would you rather lose out of all of them?
Pinky.
Really?
Yeah, I think that would be I don't know. I would probably say my pinky. I guess your thumb and your pointer finger are pretty important. So is your middle finger for certain things,
Mm-hmm.
for certain activities.
Mm-hmm.
And then ring finger, I don't know. It would be between those two. I would have to say the pinky, though. What about you?
I'd probably go ring finger.
Think
On my
so?
left hand ring finger is the one. Yeah, for sure.
And then I noticed that we had talked about the whole piracy looking like freedom thing. Why do you I want so you sort of heard my side of it, like it was like an escape from normal life and they were able to have like a day job and be a part of like a crew and have a purpose and all that kind of stuff. Where do you sort of sit on why it was so enticing to people? Where do you stand on that?
Because I think, again, if you're either living in Britain, you got the monarchy, right? So you're not free per se. If you're in the military with the British Navy, I mean, you're again under their orders. There's no democracy, there's no voting, there's no whatever, like whatever they say goes. So it's like you're kind of told what to do. And with this, it was like, these guys are like, we're gonna vote on, who we should attack, what we should do, blah blah blah. So it was more, it on paper, it looks like more freedom. Probably more of an illusion of freedom because at the end of the day, like, were all of them honorable? Probably not. Like how much did they actually stick to the pirate code?
Right. And it was like some people, like we're going to talk about some different people, obviously, here and get started with the next segment. But you had some people that were it was very ironclad for them. And then you had certain people that we're going to get into that it didn't mean as much. They sort of ruled with their own iron fist type deal. So
Mm-hmm.
we're going to go up and down the spectrum, obviously, of the people, and they're going to be very different from the next. But like I said, I think that there is a stigma. I think you also mentioned this earlier in the episode. There's a stigma of a pirate, and these people sort of broke that mold in their own special way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and like honestly, like let's think back to like this time period, right? Like late 1600s, early 1700s. I could totally see why like you might want to just go live that lifestyle. Like you're in the Caribbean, beautiful weather, beautiful women, you got rum, you can pretty much do what you want.
But why is the rum gone?
And I mean, you make some money. The problem is that like very few of them ever like enough was a little bit more. They never made like a big score and then like, all right, we're done. It was like on to the next one. So
Yeah, it was always like a wanting more type scenario. Like there was a lot of gluttony and like that kind of stuff, and obviously lust for, like you mentioned, the women and all that kind of stuff. Like it was enticing for somebody that
mhm.
didn't have that lifestyle. Actually had the exact opposite, where it sounds like their life was pretty shitty for the most part.
Yeah, especially like you're young, you know?
Well, yeah, 100%. Like the whole adolescent mentality comes into it, where like
Mm-hmm.
you're not as developed as a human being, and you sort of read into that whole like, if I have all this money, it's gonna, all these women and all this exploit and all that kind of stuff that's gonna change my life completely. And I think a lot of people get wrapped up in that. It's not always the answer to the problem. It's usually the opposite.
No. And also, like, back then, in this time period, like, I don't know,
I mean, you were pretty well. I mean, if you were
16.
well off, 9 times out of 10, you were either royalty or you were stealing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Because I don't think the military paid all that great.
No, not. No, I
Even
mean,
when Britain
even
was at its prime, I don't
right,
think,
100%.
which most of these, I would assume most of these guys went into the British Navy at a very young age. They got to the Caribbean because of just the expanse that Britain conquered. And then, like, would you want to go back to England?
Well, would you want to go back to
England?
that lifestyle? That's the whole.
Would you
That's the
want
whole entice. That's
right,
the whole enticing of the
right.
lifestyle, is that like I have everything here at my disposal.
Yeah.
Why
Like,
would I
all
go
right.
backwards?
Yeah. Do you want to go
Even
back
if it's
to
bad, even if it's frowned upon, even if it's illegal, even if you're going to lose your life over it, it's still better than what I had.
right? Like, look, like I'm sharing my screen, but like, you really like look at that.
Yeah. We're
Look at
looking
that.
at pictures of like the Bahamas and like Jamaica right
This
now for
is
people that
so
are
this
listening.
is Turks and Caicos, and for those of you that don't know where Turks and Caicos is, Turks and Caicos is like just southeast of the Bahamas. It's actually a part of the Bahamas like chain of islands. I've actually been here a couple times. I've scuba dived here. This water is so clear, it's like being in an aquarium.
I was going to say,
That
it's
is
probably like
how
looking through a piece of glass.
it is unreal how crystal clear these waters are. I'm actually going to look up real quick shipwrecks so that way you can see like in the water because like I mean look how clear that is.
Yeah. I mean,
That's
I'd have
just
to see it for myself. It's
crazy.
probably a really high definition photo, but I have to believe it's pretty clear.
It's very clear and like you know a lot of like Blackbeard's treasure for example, like Blackbeard's treasure is supposed to be somewhere they think one of the locations is like off of the I think North Carolina or South Carolina coast. Like,
Yeah,
you
we're
want to
gonna
see
get,
the
and that's
difference
funny
and
enough, one of the people
like
we're gonna get into, but we're gonna detail that whole shipwreck and like what
yeah,
happened and everything. Yeah,
yeah. You want to see that water and what that looks like? Shipwreck. So if you look at this, like it's not the same water. And it's like the water's really rough there too, so it gets kicked up a lot.
right. So it's all the sand and grommet that's on the bottom and shit. Yeah,
Yeah, like really murky waters, which not only when you go and you're trying to like you're using a metal detector or whatever to try to find this stuff, not only is it really hard to see, there's great white sharks you got to watch out for.
right. Exactly. Yeah, you got to worry about the like
Yeah.
local like
Well,
local
no,
dangers in the
thank you.
water as well. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean the current sucks. There's
right.
sharks. I mean, one wrong move and there's a lot of ways that you can end up dead. So it's this one's more dangerous, way more dangerous. I mean, diving is dangerous to begin with, but like that's one that I would not want to, I have no intentions of looking for. Dad and I, we looked for stuff here and then here, the Cayman Islands. But yeah, so let's talk about Blackbeard.
So yeah, the first one we're getting into is Blackbeard, and he was one of the people that I would say is closest to the like pop culture myth of pirates, that they were really malicious. Like I said, ruled with iron fist type of thing, used fear as a strategy and terror as a strategy, and used a lot of psychological warfare. Like you said, I think he was the person you were talking about hanging people in like the rat. It might have been another person we're going to talk about,
No, that
but
was a different guy.
yeah, it was a different guy. Yeah, I just reminisced about it. It's a different guy. But he was notorious for like showing his strength. If you got out of line, basically would dismember you without thinking a second thought. There was a really interesting, I believe it was Blackbeard. There was a really interesting thing with his second lieutenant, or like his second in command, where he like shot him at a table in his kneecap because he disagreed with him.
Jesus. Yeah. Yeah.
But
I
like
mean,
you talk about somebody that literally put the fear, you said, of God into people. Like, you didn't mess with Blackbeard. He was thought to be like the cool thing about the documentary that we saw was his flag motif that he chose to put on his pirate flag.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was interesting. So basically, if you guys don't know what it was or have never seen it before, essentially what it was it was like a makeshift skeleton, but the skeleton had like horns and then like cloven feet, and then was holding an hourglass, I believe, in his right hand, correct?
So, yeah.
And then the hourglass was like symbolic of like you're running out of time, like they're on their way to like do whatever they're going to do. And then in his other hand, he had a spear, and a spear was pointing at like a heart. So like essentially like they were coming for your heart. So back in those days when symbolism meant a lot and you saw that flag flying, because I'm sure it was pretty prominent, it couldn't have been a small flag, I don't believe.
No, those flags were huge, dude. They
but
were
like
gigantic.
imagine seeing that on the horizon and then you're like coming to the realization like this man's coming for my neck, like type shit. It's like,
yeah, supposedly a lot of people upon seeing Blackbeard would just surrender. And not only that, obviously that flag is to incite psychological warfare, right?
of course,
The
100%.
other thing, if you caught in the documentary, is he obviously had a black beard, long black beard. He would, when they were going into battle, he would light like strings
They're
or
like
wicks or
dynamite
whatever.
fuses or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Put him under his hat through his beard, so he'd have these lit fuses smoking like in his beard, and it's like with
Wild.
his eyes all red and shit like that. Like he just looked like a maniac. He was a
Yeah.
fucking psychopath.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of people know him as Blackbeard, but he actually had a God-given name, which was Edward Teach, which I thought was the Blackbeard thing. Is it's like it's become so synonymous with piracy, and like I would have to believe that he or one other guy that we're going to talk about had to have been like your quintessential, like you've heard of the guy. You know what I mean?
I think a lot of people have heard of Blackbeard, even if you're
like
not
even
big
if you
into
don't know
pirates,
what
you've
it's
heard
about
of
or
it.
know like
Yeah.
it just with folklore and the way the world works through like word of mouth, especially back in those days where there wasn't any movies or wasn't any TV, like what people wrote down on paper and what you heard by word of mouth was kind of like gospel at that point.
Well, the other thing too, I don't think they said it in this documentary, but another one I watched, he was apparently like 6'5". Like he was enormous for back then.
Yeah, 6'5" is a big man.
Like 6'5" is big today.
Yeah, 6'5", it was definitely, it's well above
Back
average,
then,
that's for sure.
I mean, back then, like I'm tall for back then, so he was terrifying.
But I know that you were talking about the fact that he was very ornate with how he fought. Like he would dress up and like be theatrical. Like I think they said, we're going to get into some other stuff about him towards the end of like, I guess his reign of terror, if you want to put it that way. But like he was very about the business of like looking good and like menacing, and it was sort of like an image craft type thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like he wanted to create an image of what Blackbeard was, not just a pirate, but like,
yeah, like he
almost
would
like
have,
a force, if that makes sense.
So I think they said he had like, he would have like a sling of handguns. He
would have
three
four
or four
of them, 2 on each side.
Yeah. How fucking crazy is that?
And then he had the cutlass, and then he would like tie his beard up they were talking about. And then he
Like,
brought up
that's
the
like
whole
what
fuse thing. Like it's just a whole like aura type of thing. Like it's like aura farming.
That's a movie character.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's something that you don't think you'd ever see walking out of like a captain's quarters, and then there's just like this dude, like I don't know, man. Like
think about this dude. 6'5", long black beard. It's smoking. He's got 4 handguns, probably a sword or 2, and didn't he have like 70 guys?
I want to say that. Like
Crazy?
I think that's what it was. I think that might have been. I think that might have been the other one we're talking about. But I know his crew was big. I know.
Yeah, he had a. Yeah. Like fuck, man.
Yeah, it's a pretty menacing figure. But I think what we should talk about too is the flagship that he had.
Yeah.
Queen Anne. Yeah, the Queen Anne's Revenge thing. He captured it back in 1717, and he armed it with cannons in order for it to become a formidable pirate vessel. He basically intentionally ran it into the ground in the 1718, so a year later, off North Carolina, where it was discovered in 1996. It's now like a big, it's like a big tourist attraction now, like what you're talking about, like diving for shipwrecks and stuff like that. It's become like this huge, like tourist attraction, basically an archaeological site where they found like his treasure, Like, I know they probably found like documents and stuff from like the manifest and all that kind of stuff. It's an interesting find. I thought it
Do
was
you
pretty
know
interesting.
do you know they have found over 400,000 items just from that shipwreck alone?
Among like, it's just a plethora of stuff, like a cornucopia of shit.
Yeah, so they got cannons, anchors, ship parts, personal items, buttons, buckles, pipes, navigational tools, dividers, astrolabe, I fucked that up. Medical devices. So they had surgical instruments. Like this was a old slave ship that he took over and renamed and added cannons to it. There was weaponry, grenades, lead shot, and then everyday objects like pottery, glassware, German stoneware, jugs, plus evidence of the slave trade, shackles, and beads. That there's
So it was
400,000
basically
items,
like a
and there's
freaking gold
still
mine of archaeological findings for the
yeah,
most part.
and they said, according to not this documentary, but the other one that I was watching, supposedly there's still more than like half of the ship to excavate.
Really
Yes.
interesting.
I mean, it had to have been a pretty massive ship, especially since he added like what 20 or 40 cannons to it.
Something like that. I want to say it was 40. I think that's what I remember.
Yeah, that's a lot of cannons.
Yeah, it's a lot of firepower, that's for sure, because cannons do a lot of damage. Imagine 40, 20 on each side coming at you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I could see why he
yeah,
was kind of menacing from that point of view as well.
yeah.
The other really big thing that I wanted to talk about was the blockade of Charleston, and I have a little bit of knowledge on that. So essentially what it was is he blocked off a harbor for a week, basically holding that blockage of Charleston hostage, and was basically demanding from both prominent citizens and just holding ships at will, basically saying that if you don't give us what we want, we're basically going to kill everybody. So I thought that was interesting. Like you point at something and like somebody's like history or like possibly made them more infamous. I would have to believe that blocking off a port for a week, basically holding it at ransom, would be pretty prominent in the grand scheme of things of what he was about. Like it sort of painted the picture of like what he was as an individual as well as a pirate. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I just wonder if like was that a smart decision long term?
Well, I mean, if he didn't have a target on his back originally, I mean, you're taking a colonial state basically and holding it at ransom. Like, if there's no going back from something, I would have to believe that's a pretty big no-no.
Yeah.
Like, if you're gonna like, especially back in those days where you're like, if he held a port and basically just didn't let anyone pass, that's not only putting themselves at risk, like physically, but it's also doing damage to their economy because, like we said before in the beginning of the episode, that was their main mode of transportation and it was their main mode of trade. Like it was the fastest, most direct way to get to somewhere to do that business. So, like, not only are you fucking them up physically, you're basically taking their entire way of life and stalemating it for a week.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, kind of crazy. Kind of crazy. Did that because like he had to get a different ship, didn't he?
I believe so,
Or no?
yeah. Because the one he ran aground, the Queen's Revenge, we actually ran it aground intentionally.
Right.
Not sure of the backing behind that. I think we touched a little bit on it, but essentially, like, yeah, he did it intentionally for some form or purpose. Maybe to lose track of people. I don't know. But the last thing I want to talk about too was the ambush and the death of Blackbeard, because it's got a lot of like you said, movie star qualities to it. Basically what happened was is they ran into a naval ship. Somebody was tracking him and found out where he was, and they ensued into like the naval battle with like the cannons and the grape shot and all that kind of stuff. And I think what we both saw in the documentary that we watched was he was basically at a point in the battle, like what was going on, and he was basically surrounded by people. And somebody basically lodged a broadsword into his neck, not once but twice, and then they ended up basically decapitating him and throwing him on the bow, hanging his head off the bow as they sailed away from the
As a
battle and all that kind of
trophy.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, do you think this is kind of a wild take? Do you think that sort of boosted his allure?
Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
how so?
I mean, you gotta think that I'm sure that there were some of his. Yeah, I think like the other, petty officers or whatever that were fighting in that, and then also like Blackbeard's own like guys that were fighting. Word spreads, and like, holy shit, this guy was so important that they strung his head up at the front of the ship as a trophy
Make a point.
to make a point. Yeah, like, and like as far as that ambush, like kind of like that ambush happened because he ran his ship aground. So it's kind of like if he doesn't run the Queen Anne's Revenge aground to basically like force their hand into giving him what he wanted, maybe he doesn't meet his fate there.
Yeah, that's an
That's
interesting point. Yeah,
it's kind of like his ego got the best of him.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I mean, it always sort of catches up with you. That's why I tell everybody to be humble, right? Is because eventually all the shit comes around.
Yeah. But he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would be humble.
No, it doesn't. No, not from not from the research we did or what we've read and that kind of stuff for sure.
Yeah. But like for him to go out the way he went out, do you think that he would want to go out any other way?
No, not from not from the little knowledge that we have of, because I would have to believe that, like, even though he was like a boastful figure, that was sort of like I don't want to say the facade, but let's call it what it is. It's called an image, right? Like there could have been a lot to do with what he was about that wasn't really how he was. We'll never know that. We only have the factual information of what we've heard from historians and things like that about the type of person he was. And then you also have to take into account too the stories and how they've been sort of like warped into like this mythical figure, which as history tells us, it's not always that black and white, right? Like sometimes there's a lot of allure set to somebody's image or the way they were that is sort of culminates out of like word of mouth. It's like the telephone game, right? Mm-hmm. So like when you tell somebody something and we get to the end of the line, 15 people deep, the story is widely different than when it first started. So I think that's important to take into context when you're talking about these people, that as mythical as they sound, might not have been exactly like that. And I think that's where the whole allure and folklore comes into play. And I think that's interesting, how like folklore can sort of shape our reality of what life is really like or what a person was like or something like that.
Also, to quote Napoleon, history is written by the victors. Like the guys that were there, those Lieutenant Robert Maynard who ambushed Blackbeard after they ran aground, like they're the ones that survived. They get to write the book of what happened.
Right.
I mean, he could have not died from getting slashed in the throat. It could have just been a gunshot to the head, not dramatic at all, and whatever. Like, who knows if they actually put his head on the mast? You don't know.
Yeah.
That's dramatic effect. So
right. And it's all for good reason, considering what they were trying to do with the whole piracy issue in the first place, is they were trying to ward people off from doing it in the first place. I mean, severed head on a bow, literally swinging to and fro as you're sailing, would be a pretty good calling card to probably not do that.
Yeah. The other thing too is you got to think like piracy at this time, one of the big attacks, which we'll get into in a little bit, but like you got the East India Company and those trade routes over there with all the spices and the tea and the amount of money that the East India Company was carrying, and they got attacked a couple times. Like they needed to make an example of the pirates. Like, hey, if you fucking do this, this is what's going to happen to you.
Yeah, so for sure. But the second one we wanted to get into was one that you touched on, so you might have a little bit more segue into what we're going to talk about with him. Obviously, I'll do my best to look up information and stuff while you're talking about it and see if I can get a handle on it. But you wanted to talk about Captain Morgan.
Yeah, Captain Morgan.
So give me a little bit of insight into that if you can, and I'll sort of poke in where I can if I have a thought or what have you. So I'll let you sort of take it from here.
Yeah. So, I know Captain Morgan just a little bit from my travels down in the Caribbean. And, I think what's interesting about him is he was treated kind of like a king down in the Caribbean. Like he was, even by like the people that he attacked long term, he had like an honor. He had attacks on Spanish ports, Portobello in Panama, and I'm gonna butcher this name, Maracaibo. And when he attacked these, pretty sure he didn't leave any prisoners. That was pretty lethal.
So essentially, if they didn't play ball, he was going to kill everybody. Essentially,
pretty much. He was originally he was a privateer.
Yeah, that's a big distinction. So like, I think we should make that distinction. A lot of people think like buccaneer, privateer, pirate, they're all the same thing. They're completely different.
Yeah. So he was a Welsh privateer. Okay. So essentially, he was a government sanctioned, and he became a legendary figure by raiding Spanish colonies for England. So essentially, England gave him permission to go ahead and pirate any Spanish, galleons or any
Yeah, so
places
essentially he
that
was a
he could.
mercenary. He was essentially a mercenary for the government.
Yes, yes. And like he was knighted. He was made a governor of Jamaica. So he wasn't just a buccaneer, like he was a s- strategist and a complex figure who transitioned from brutal attacks like sacking Panama to becoming a respected colonial leader before dying so he owned a plantation in Jamaica.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because you sort of went from like the rags to riches thing. So like
Yeah.
he was a pirate. Then all of a sudden he gets knighted and then becomes governor of Jamaica and is like take this entire 180 turn in life. Like quite a distinct difference from the person in Blackbeard that we just talked about earlier.
Well, and how he made all that money was the big one. His most famous capturing was of Panama City in 1671. That's where he earned the wealth for him in England. Like under contract, he got a percentage of whatever they took over. And he was so successful at doing this, like he was going to different places in the Caribbean and just taking over those forts and stuff like that. So after Panama, which that technically occurred after a peace treaty, he was arrested but later knighted by King Charles II and appointed lieutenant governor of Jamaica. But he was given a funeral fit for a king when he passed away. I think it's really telling about his lasting legacy because I mean they made a literal rum company based
Yeah.
off of him.
Like, yeah, when we were talking about Captain Morgan, I wasn't trolling everybody. It's like the actual Captain Morgan on the fucking rum bottle. Like, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and like if you go like going down to the Caribbean, then I've been to Jamaica. I've been lucky enough to go to Jamaica before. Like, yeah, the guy like he is loved down there. Got loved. I shouldn't say loved, but he's a pretty big polarizing figure in
Yeah,
Jamaica.
like you either love him or hate him, but he's still a part of like their prairie history,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Stuff still at the forefront.
Yeah, and like yes, he owned a plantation, yes, he owned slaves, but everyone has to understand that like back then in those days that was I'm not saying it's right. Slavery is wrong, but back then slavery was not like every country had slaves and it didn't matter the color of your skin. It didn't matter like how wealthy you were. Like there were senators that had to serve slave sentences like in Rome. Like slavery's been around forever. And unfortunately, it's still around today. But yeah, he was really a really interesting guy. Just to
Like
go from that rags to
prolific
riches.
figure for sure.
Yeah, yeah. There's a couple things where he essentially stopped being a pirate for a little bit, and then he kind of went back to being a pirate, and then he stops, and then he ends up actually hunting pirates. How interesting
Yep.
is that?
Remember that? Yeah, it's kind of like the 180 turn I was talking about. It's actually freaking wild.
Yeah.
Like literally using his own knowledge against the people that he was like fighting to protect. It's kind of wild. You want to talk about mutiny?
Yeah.
But I think those are probably the two, if not, I would say those are probably the two polarizing figures that we're going to talk about. Like one was sort of like took, like I said, the 180, became like, pretty prominent figure in the military and just in government in general. And then you look at his past experiences and he was like the scummy of the stuff, the scummiest of the scum type deal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see how the 180 flips. But the other really cool one that we wanted to talk about was the duo I was talking about before, was the Anne Bonny and the Mary Read thing. I thought that was a very interesting story that they touched on in the documentary. Is basically these two women essentially disguised themselves as male and became part of like an actual like legit privateering crew. Like not a privateering crew, a piracy crew. And the whole allure of their story is really interesting. I don't know if you want to touch on that because I have my own thoughts, but I'll sort of let you go first.
Yeah, so it was Anne who
Anne Bonny and Mary Read. Yep.
Anne actually she was in a romantic fling with the Captain Calico, right?
I believe so. Yeah. Calico Jack. Yes.
Yeah, Calico Jack. And then she meets Marg,
I think
Reed,
that's what the name was. Yeah, Marguerite.
who ends up after she admits that she's a woman, Marg actually ends up telling her that my real name's Mary and I'm a woman as well. And I guess there was at one point with Calico, him and his men, they were getting overtaken, so they all ran away like a bunch of pussies into
It was like a
you know,
cargo hold or something that they talked
yeah,
about. Like they ran to the cargo
ran
hold or something like that.
ran away, and then
Yeah.
the two women were the only ones that fought. They got captured and arrested, but like they actually like were trying to fight off the British. I believe it was the British, wasn't it?
I believe so. I believe so.
Yeah. So really interesting, because I mean, when you think pirates, you don't usually think of women, right?
Yeah.
Like you think of, these drunk guys who
Missing 15 teeth and
yeah, maybe an
smelling like an
eye.
actual pigsty,
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they got a pet parrot.
Yeah,
Who knows?
just hangs out on the shoulder type shit.
Yeah. But no, I mean, you don't really think of women, especially
And
back
then
then,
that would have
living
been
that lifestyle.
to even make your point even further is there was like the romantic relationship between the two of them.
Did they?
Uh,
Is that what they
no,
had?
no. I'm talking about between Anne and Calico.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How do you keep that under wraps? Would you like? I mean, I guess sworn to secrecy is what you would call it, right? But like, she tells one person, don't you think it would have gone out? Like,
I mean, you
how
would
would you
think
not real?
that.
How would you not realize? Like, you could only go. I don't know. Like, I don't know.
So, yeah, I don't know. I kind of have. Did the crew really not know? Or did they know and not care? Or was it really not as hidden? Like, I believe Mary probably was more hidden than Anne. But at the same time, like, let's be honest, they're pirates. Moral code, not exactly existent. Probably something you would want to not exactly advertise as being the only woman on a ship of 30 to 50 pirates. And like, was Anne sleeping was she sleeping in the captain's
That I
chambers
don't
with them?
know. That I
Or
don't
was
know.
she sleeping below deck with the 50 guys?
But if you're carrying on a romantic relationship,
Everybody's
there's only
got to
so
know,
many
right?
places you can go on the ship.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
100%.
Like,
Yeah,
somebody would
people
have
had
had
to have.
if they were having a romantic relationship. Let's even say go a little bit further. Let's say a sexual relationship, because we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute.
We'll get to
Yeah.
that in a minute. You would have to believe, like, where's dude? Like, he's been gone for 2 hours. We're doing all this work. Like, the fuck? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it would have raised questions.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
why I
for
think it's
sure.
I think it's a little far fetched. And then when we get to the other stuff that we're talking about with the sexual relationship and whatnot, that gets even wilder. And you're gonna make a case that it should even been more apparent.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it was though.
But that's the question, right? Is that
we
you
don't.
also you said earlier that like they get to write the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe they did know. I don't know.
Right.
But
Yeah, I don't know
I feel
either.
like it. I don't know.
I feel like at some point, for however long they were on the ship and doing what they were doing, like there had to have been question marks.
I mean, there are some women that could cut their hair super short and maybe pass as like a young male, especially if they aren't blessed up top. I mean, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. It just seems
interesting.
like there would have to be like, I just don't know how it went so long, however long, because I don't know the timetable of how long they were, like, you know what I mean? I don't know if.
Yeah, that there wasn't a ton of information.
Yeah. So maybe that was part of it, is that they just got rid of it or something, or it was never found or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're going to get into the sexual relationship. That's where it gets interesting, is that like their capture, and then the reason why they were basically pulled in, they were captured, like you said, they were facing execution, and then the execution was stayed. Do you want to talk about that? Sort of point to that a little bit?
Yeah, so they're supposed to be hanged, and then the women both say that they both are pregnant, and the judge orders a pregnancy test, and it turns out that both women are indeed pregnant. I believe Mary died in jail because she got really sick.
I believe that was Anne.
Was it Anne?
Yeah, I believe it was Anne, because Mary just like up and disappeared, I believe. You might have to fact check me on that.
Oh, I thought Anne did. Okay.
You might have to fact check me on that, but I think Anne, like you said, was the one that was having the romantic relationship with Calico, and then Mary just she died in prison because of a fever, I believe. And then Mary Read was the one that disappeared. I might have that flopped. Just fact
No,
check me real
it's
quick.
flopped. So Mary Read died in prison around 1721, likely from illness. And then Anne Bonny, her fate is unknown, but she may have been released. There's a burial record for an Anne Bonny in Jamaica in 1733.
Okay, so I had him flip flop. That's what I thought. Okay.
So yeah, interesting. Here's the question. Was Calico boinking both of them?
And that's how they sort of found out about each other? Is that sort of what you're getting at?
Or they had like a three-way thing going on?
Yeah. I mean, back in those days, I mean, unfortunately, women were treated like commodities.
Yeah.
They weren't very well respected. I mean,
know.
if you were a female, especially in like, we're talking about like ancient Greece, ancient Rome, that kind of stuff, you were kind of to bear children, take care of the household, and that's all you did. I mean, we could talk about it all over history about like rulers basically birthing children out of incest too. That was a very common thing.
Yeah. Well, that was definitely common, very common in the medieval times. I believe some parts of ancient Egypt, Rome, Greece,
because it was all about supplementing and refilling the bloodline.
It was a bloodline because they were from the divine, from the gods. Yeah, so it was frowned upon to, you couldn't dirty the waters. So, I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that Marriott was getting it on with another pirate on board? Or do you think that it was with Calico, or maybe even like one of the guards at the prison? Like, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean,
like, the fact that they're both pregnant at the same exact fucking time.
Yeah, I mean, it would, like I said, I mean, this was a very different time. I'm not saying it's right, but like at the same time, shows us that back in those days, women were treated as commodity. So would it surprise me if he was having a sexual relationship with both of them? No, it wouldn't, because that was just a common thing. Like they were treated as a vessel versus, something actually important. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know if anybody knows that. I don't know if you're looking that up, but.
So I'm looking up right now. This is according to Google AI. So whatever. Challenging gender norms. Both women often wore men's clothing in battle, though they also lived as women off duty, gaining respect from the crew despite the superstition that women brought bad luck to ships. So it looks like the crew knew.
Interesting.
From this.
So why are the disguises?
In battle?
In battle. Got it. Okay.
They wore men's clothing in battle.
Got it. Okay. That's interesting.
They were fierce fighters. They fought alongside men on Rackham's ship using pistols, cutlasses, and knives, earning reputations for bravery and ferocity, even reportedly fighting harder than the men on. Both women grew up in challenging circumstances, adopting male disguises to defy societal norms and find independence, eventually crossing paths in the pirate haven of Nassau. So, I mean, kind of cool knowing that, like,
it's interesting that they were able to sort of, that's actually really cool.
That is cool. And you know what? That kind of goes back to like, maybe it was kind of like freedom.
Yeah, they were sort of able to go outside the norm of what was expected of them and actually put forth the work and that kind of stuff and get into a scenario that they had never been in or would have never been in regardless. So
the fact that they
maybe it was like the adrenaline shot for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, let's be honest, like, if you have a shitty upbringing, boy or girl, it's going to have an effect on you. And I mean, like, there's girls in gangs now. Like, if all's you know is that lifestyle and, robbing and killing, like, it's going to come natural to you.
It definitely takes a hold, that's for sure. But then the last one we're going to talk about is another sort of extreme. It's actually sort of a tie between, I would probably say, it's actually not the last one. We actually have one more after that, but it's sort of like the, I guess, pairing of Blackbeard as well as Henry Morgan. And there's one person we're going to get into that's going to be the last one, which is Henry Avery, but we're going to talk about Black Bart or Bartholomew Roberts. So like he is probably, other than Blackbeard, I would say probably the most prolific pirate that we've at least heard of. He was I believe he was a naval officer as well, was he not?
Believe he was. Let me put
Yeah, I
his.
believe he was a naval officer, but what really matters, just get back to me with that fact check.
Yeah.
Why he was so prominent was what we were talking about before. Legend has it that he had captured over 400 plus ships. So he was very well versed in what he was doing and knew how to do it to a degree that I would say a lot of people don't. He was much more methodical. You had also touched on the pirate code stuff. He was very ethical in the way he did things. People didn't drink, people didn't fornicate. And I think they said something about the fact that he had a rule about candles and everything with light had to be extinguished by 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, no
So they
candles.
had a
Yep.
fucking curfew.
Yeah, I mean, like, this guy was all business. Like,
Right.
he was like, yeah, listen, we're here for a fucking reason. And if you're not on board, I'm going to kill you. So,
Choose wisely.
yeah.
But I thought, like, the drunkenness, he also banned gambling, which I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of, like, the lore of piracy from, like, I guess, a degenerative standpoint, if you're talking about gambling and drinking in excess and, you know, excessive fornication, that kind of stuff, he was sort of the pivot to that. Like, he didn't, it was a no nonsense, like you said, he was all business. He was no nonsense type of individual. I think he also had, I believe it was 3 ships under his command. So he was able to not only have a ship to himself, but he had backup, like lots of backup. And I think the really cool thing about him was he was sort of forced. I don't want to say forced because everybody always has a choice. But with the lifestyle that he had while he was, I believe, when he was a naval officer, he didn't really like it.
So he wasn't a naval officer. He was a second mate on a slave ship, the Princess, under Captain Abraham Plum. And this was in 1719. In early June that year, Princess was anchored at Anamabu, thence whatever. It was situated along the Gold Coast of West Africa when she was captured by pirates. The pirates were in 2 vessels, the Royal Rover and Royal James, and were led by Captain Howell Davis. Davis, like Roberts, was a Welshman, originally from Milford Haven in Pembrokeshire. Roberts and several other of the crew of the Princess were forced to join the pirates.
So essentially, they held him at gunpoint or knife point or sword point or
Yeah,
whatever.
you're going to join us or die.
Yeah.
So I'd, you know.
So
Yeah.
that sort of gives the context of like the forced pirate. And then he transitioned to this prolific figure of being probably the most well-known, if not one of the most well-known, I would say probably top 3 that I've heard of.
Well, he's the most successful.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying like as far as allure, like he's probably top 2, if not top. I would say probably top 2. If I would say Blackbeard's probably the one I've heard the most about. Black Bart's a little bit on the other side, but doesn't mean he's not as prolific. Does that make sense? But like I said, he had really high organized fleets. Like I said, he had 3 ships under his command, which is a lot more than anybody had. They usually just one. I mean, I don't think that anybody we've touched on had more than one. They had more than one ship, but like under their command, he had basically a fleet, which was unheard of. Some of his big highlights that we did some research on, obviously, was the Forced to Pirate Legendary Captain. And then he had a lot of like flamboyant, sort of the same thing as Blackbeard, but Blackbeard was more menacing. His was more like I'm better than you type shit.
Mm-hmm.
Was a lot more peacockish, I guess, if you want to say, as far as what he was doing and the way he was doing it. And then we talked about, you got me mixed up earlier, but this is the one I wanted to talk about, where he like strung somebody up to the rigging or would string people up to the rigging of the ship and would like use them as target practice and shit.
Yep.
Like, you're going to kill somebody, I got it. But then we have to maim them with bullets. It's a little excessive, but if you're trying to get a point across, I mean, that's one way to do it.
Yeah, that is definitely one way to do it. Did you see how many ships he took over?
I thought it said something around like 400 plus.
400 plus.
Yeah. So like I said, he certainly had a way of doing things and it worked. However you want to put that definition of worked on it, but it was successful, whether it was illegal or not illegal. He actually did it in spades from what he was trying to do. And also he was very flamboyant to the fact that there's like record of him like refusing to surrender until his ultimate like death. And I believe what they talked about with his death was that he was like one of his men basically like there was like the whole ordeal with the ship that came on and they broadsided each other. And then when that happened, one of the guys noticed that he was dead, and he actually went up with like grape shot. I think it was grape shot in his neck.
Yeah, it was grape shot in his neck.
How he was killed. And the dude went to like go wake him up like he was still alive. Like his throat had been like ripped out by this shit, like it was gone.
Yeah, no, he's gone. He's gone.
But like it was one of those things where like he was such a prolific person. They're like, oh, maybe he's okay, type shit. You know what I mean? Like that, like brainwashing effect, like you were talking about earlier, where they were like revered as gods. You have a shipmate trying to wake up a captain that's his literally throat is blown out. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And
He
then,
was,
like I said, his crew. I think what they did was in the documentary you and I saw was they to like sort of like save face from him being killed. They like wrapped him up in a sail or whatever and threw him overboard.
yeah, they didn't want him paraded like a trophy.
Yeah, I think they did that and to his first lieutenant or whatever. I think it was both of them.
Yeah.
And then they quickly surrendered afterwards. So like they were like down, you know, they were up Schitt's Creek without a paddle, basically without him, which I thought was interesting.
And according to Wikipedia, apparently when the ship that took them over, the HMS Swallow, apparently when they saw it, they thought it was a fleeing merchant ship. I guess like some of his crew was drunk.
Was that's what it was? Yeah. Now I remember. Yep.
Like, damn.
Yeah. Like
Broke the
it was
rule.
something to the effect like they had been anchored somewhere. I believe it was in Jamaica. I think I could be wrong about that.
This one,
They were like anchored off the coast of somewhere and they were having like a party or something. And whoever showed up, like, yeah, like it was interesting story.
yeah.
They basically showed up and they were too drunk to fight is basically how I understood it.
Yeah, but I think that was also the Anne and Mary story.
Was it?
That's why they retreated underneath the ship.
That's right. I'm getting it mixed up. You're
Yeah.
completely right about that. You're completely right about
Yeah.
that. Yeah, the Black
Apparently-
Bart thing ended on the ship with the grape shot. You're completely right. You're completely right.
Yeah. And
That's
where
why
the
they
hell-
retreated into the hold. Yep. That's exactly. I remember exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, no, I'm trying to see where Bart. All right, Battle of Cape Lopez. So Cape Lopez off the coast of West Africa.
That's
Or off
where
the
it
coast
that's
of
where it
West
happened.
Africa, where he died. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And
So-
then the last one we want to get into is kind of like the most prolific figure as far as like somebody that we don't know exactly what happened to them. And we wanted to get into Henry Avery, and I thought this was a really interesting character that we could talk about.
Yeah, I don't know too much about this one. This one was.
He was
interesting to me.
essentially I believe he was a privateer originally. And with that, basically what happened with him was that he was never, you know, we've gone through 5 other scenarios of these people being privateers and or rather pirates. Blackbeard was killed. Morgan was rewarded for what he did by becoming, you know, the governor of Jamaica and all that stuff. Bonnie and Reed, they were imprisoned and then erased from history, basically. Black Bart, he died fighting, and then Avery just vanished off the face of the earth. Like there's no record of him ever being buried, never being found, anything like that. So what do you think happened to him? Do you think he just sort of sailed off at the sunset at the right time, right place? What do you think sort of with that?
I mean, probably. Either that or maybe they did the heist and then, I mean, it was the largest heist, most profitable heist, in history. It was in 1695 by plundering the Mughal treasure ship Ganjia Sawi. I mean, this ship could have been sank. You don't know. I mean, you know, could have been a hurricane, could have been sank. But what I think happened was maybe he was the smartest one and just was like, yeah, all right, we're done.
Cut the ties, got rid of who he needed to get rid of, covered everything up and left.
Dude, there are so many islands there. Again, I've been really lucky to go to a lot of Caribbean islands. I've been to the Cayman Islands, Jamaica. I've been to Puerto Rico. I've been to the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos. You know, I've been, you know, Mexico and stuff like that. Like I've been a lot of places, and there are so many small islands. You could have very easily, especially like if you got gold and stuff like that. You go to, you know, a small island that's close enough to a big island. You could make your own, you know, living and stuff like that. Or, you know, he could have gone to Florida. He could have gone to Mexico. He could have gone to Brazil. I mean, you don't know.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of places that he could have gone to. So, yeah, I think he probably just, like, if it's the biggest treasure ever, maybe he just was the only smart one.
Yeah. But it's interesting to see, like, you know, you have people that were, you know, people on the list that we've sort of accounted for in the episode. They all sort of had their, do you think he has the most allured because he was never found, never captured, never nothing?
Probably. What
because
do you
he's one
think?
of the few on this list that I had never heard about before.
I had never heard of this guy.
But maybe that's the point,
Ever. Yeah.
is that he was, he was the person that did it, basically cut his ties and got the fuck out. It'd be interesting to actually find out about, like, do some more research and find out what actually happened to him. Like, if there's ever a time down the road, like later in our lives, it'd be interesting to figure it out.
Yeah, it would. I mean, like, I think it's important to tell everybody that, like, with these 5 or 6 pirates that we're highlighting today, we could do entire episodes on each pirate.
Right.
Like, there's that much, like, history. Like, these battles were, like, epic battles, and stuff like that. I think with Henry, it's interesting because, like, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of information because it was such a short reign. Like, it's one big heist. That's really all we
Yeah.
got here.
Right.
So I think it's mystery too, but just not a lot of information on the guy. So
You're sort of left to
if
wonder, and
you
it's
don't,
left to sort of like, it's sort of
yeah,
left a myth and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, like who are you going to talk about? The guy who's done one heist? Yes, it's the biggest, but he's done one heist and you don't really know anything about him. Or you're going to talk about fucking Blackbeard
Who
or
had like a
Black
tyrannical
Bart,
reign
or,
type
right,
thing. Yeah.
right, or Black Bart who captured 400 ships and has a whole history lesson on him. I think that's why I never heard of this guy, and who knows? He could have been
Yeah.
stranded somewhere too. I mean, you don't know. Like I remember being in Turks and Caicos, and we did a dive, and on the way back from the dive, we were passing this small, teeny tiny. This island was like if you put, I don't know, 2 of my houses together. That's how big this island. It was like a big rock, okay, with like one palm tree, small little sandbar. But it was essentially was a big giant rock, and we go up to it. And the guy that was our captain, it was just my dad and this guy and his assistant and me. And we anchor, and he's like, "I want to show you guys something." So we anchor, jump off the diving boat, and swim up to this little island rock, whatever. And this was when I was much younger and in way better shape. There was this like part, almost like a little cave type part of it that went into the rock, go into it, and if you look up, you could climb, and there was an opening in the top of the cave. So I climbed, my dad and I, and the guy's name was Wayne, we climb up through this hole, and we're standing on top of this rock. There's a palm tree, a couple other small plants, and another smaller boulder rock over to the left. And he goes, "Go look at that rock." And go up to the rock, and it is a dude's name with the year 16 something, and it's got it says shipwreck with like the date of the ship was wrecked on there, etched on there, and then it had like lines of like days that he was marking off that he was there.
Like how long he'd been there, like
He
marooned.
was he was like a stranded sailor or pirate or something. It was just
Interesting.
crazy. But like, of how many other people did that happen to?
Right. They're probably all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So getting sort of towards the end of the Golden Age, like there's a couple points that I want to sort of touch on. As far as like why it ended, why we don't see as much. Like this was sort of like a way of life, whereas now it's sort of seen as like an underbelly type scenario. Where this was beforehand, this was sort of like how people made their living, right? Why do you think it sort of ended? And I want to touch on the two that I thought was interesting, like the public executions, like we talked about these. I don't know if we talked about it before, but they basically like we talked about it with Blackbeard, like they would publicly execute these people and leave their bodies as like display.
Well, I know we didn't talk about him, but William Kidd, he was like the first pirate that like they hung in public. Like, if you do this, this is going to be you. And he was one of the pirate. He attacked the East India Company. He attacked the East India ship. So that obviously that was in that, right? That's the one that you watched about him. The beginning.
Yep.
Yeah. So like they hung him, and there was a trial and everything like that. And he acted innocent, which he definitely wasn't innocent in that. I don't know how you feel about that.
I mean, I'm sort of siding with you. I don't think there was a lot. There wasn't very much to it to lean the other way. Yeah.
Yeah, like dude, you attacked Britain's largest
Yeah.
money grabber. Like,
Well, it's how
and
that's
they
how
wanted to make
effectively they traded with other nations and other countries. Is like
yeah.
that's what we're getting
So
back to before is that like, you know, the water trade or the naval trade was like it for most countries, if not all countries back in that period of time. Like there were no cars, there was no Amazon, there was no, you know what I mean? There wasn't any of that. So it comes back to the thing I was talking about with the Blackbeard stuff with the blockade. Like if you're going to stop the economic, let's say stabilization, right, of a colony, you're not only harming them physically, you're harming their way of life and economics and agriculture and everything you were talking about before. So not
then
only are you
you're hurting
physically, you're detrimenting their
yeah, and you're hurting England because now they're not getting their tax money and they're not getting their imports and their all that. So you're hurting their economy. So yeah, I think the public executions probably. I know there. What was it? Was it King Henry that gave the pirates a year of like you have a year to turn yourself in and you'll get amnesty?
I
Was that what it was?
think that's who it was. I'm not totally sure. I'll fact check it though, but that was the other one I want to
Yeah,
talk to you about. This is like the amnesty programs and stuff like that. Touch
yeah,
on that
but
a little
like
bit while I fact check that.
yeah, so he basically, whichever king it was, he said that he'll give amnesty to any pirate who turns themselves in within a year. And there were pirates that did do that, but they turned themselves in, they got amnesty, and then they went right back to their pirate ways. So, I mean, that didn't work. Like it sounds great, but it's like, in theory, it sounds great, but guess what? Usually, if you let people off the hook, they're gonna take advantage of you.
So
So
just to fact check you, it was King George the First.
King George first. Okay.
Was the monarch who issued the 1717 proclamation for suppressing of pirates, aka the Act of Grace. It was a strategic move to protect British trade interests during the Golden Age of Piracy. So there you go. But the other one I wanted to talk to is sort of goes in tandem with the fourth point is the expansion of the Navy, like the royal expansion of Navy in Great Britain. That in turn, with them becoming more prominent, probably took like the safe havens of like Jamaica and Turks and Caicos and all that, like they were sort of off the
Mm-hmm.
grid in those places. That was sort of like their home base, I guess, if you want to call it that. With the expansion,
Yeah.
I would have to believe that was like a cause and effect for those places becoming uninhabitable for what they were trying to do and what they were trying to accomplish. So, how do you feel about that? Like, do you think those two go in tandem or do you think they're separate? Like, I personally think they're in tandem. I think they go hand in hand, basically.
No, I think they definitely go hand in hand. Absolutely. Their navy got even stronger. Their reach got bigger. They started getting more governors in the islands and stuff like that. And I mean, think about it too. Like Captain Morgan ended up hunting pirates
Right.
after so I
Yeah.
think, it was a problem that they needed to get rid of. It had its reign for, what, close to 70 years, 100 years, something like that. It had its reign. I mean, they had a run. But I will say, too, another thing to consider is also that time period, especially towards the end of it. Like, you had the British Navy, you had the British who had a bigger interest in this side of the world because of the Revolutionary War that was being started and going on, too. So I think that played a big part in it of what was going on in the Americas. So there were more Britain was sending more soldiers and ships this way. And so that's I agree with you.
I think it was just like I said, I think it's a cause and effect whenever you have, a prominent military that's going to drive back that like it's sort of like a cause and effect on the other side too is because the piracy brought on the expansion. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like like we've only named like 5 or 6 people like you said. Like I said, this was a complete and like total like way of life. This is how like if you weren't in the military and you weren't just like a regular civilian, this is how you made your money. This is how you made your worth. This is what you built your life around. So like it was not just a few people like we're naming here. It was like I said, it was a way of life. So like just in
Yeah.
closing, which one that we talked about sort of I guess stood out to you? Like which one, I don't want to say your favorite, but like which one was the most prominent based on the research that we did and what you just know yourself? Like what was the one that was most interesting, I guess
I
is my
mean,
point.
I think can I say two?
Yeah.
All right. Anne and Mary was really interesting.
Okay.
That was really interesting. And then the other one that was really interesting was Henry Avery.
Yeah, because we didn't know a lot about him, right?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite pirate is Blackbeard
Okay.
for sure. Yeah, I think Blackbeard's my favorite pirate, but those two are very interesting that I didn't know a lot about. I would definitely dive into research and learning more about.
I think mine were the ones I already knew about because we sort of delved into like what they were really about. And I'm going to take the
Okay.
obvious choices. I think Blackbeard and the Black Bart stories and like their allure is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because that's what I think
So
about
who?
when I think about pirates. I think about them being really menacing, and maybe that's the media that's sort of warped me into like making that interesting. But I think that like you hear about dictators and people in power doing the exact same thing. They just happen to not have the governmental platform that some of these people had, right? They
Yeah.
had the platform of what they were doing and the people that they were overseeing and that kind of thing, but it still carries the same weight. You get what I'm saying? Like they don't have throngs of people and throngs of fans and all this kind of stuff. And but like you said, as we talked about earlier, is where they were at in life, they were revered as like the person. Like you don't cross, dude, or something's gonna happen to you type thing. You know what I mean? Like and
Right. Well, and they made.
and they enforced it. They enforced it. That was the biggest thing, is that they would like walk the walk type of thing. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say the other thing that like made the legacy and the fantasy of pirates so like alluring was the plays that were written and like that side of it to
Yeah.
get people enthralled with it, because you didn't have TV, you didn't have radio. Like plays were the entertainment back then, and I guess people loved it.
Yeah, I mean it's the same thing that we talked about in a previous episode with like the Colosseum and stuff back in like the Roman ages. It was a spectacle, right? It was something to go do and people were going to talk about. You know, it was like, you know, it's like going to see a good band or something, or going to going to a music festival or something like that. Like you have the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty sure Shakespeare did a pirate play.
That I don't
Almost
know. That would actually
positive.
be interesting to find out.
I'm almost positive. All right, so who is your favorite pirate?
Out of all six?
Out of all the pirates in the history of pirates, who's your favorite pirate?
As far as the ones that I know, I knew the most about Blackbeard.
Okay. Is he your favorite?
I would say he's probably the one I find most interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Why?
Just because of the allure, like the aura that sort of follows him. I mean, like he created an image that was so, like you said, that was so terrifying and so ingrained in people's minds that they literally didn't even put up a fighting chance. Like when they saw a dude coming, they knew it was over. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
having that kind of power and that kind of stigma to your name, that like if somebody mentions you, like their hair stands up. It's not an easy thing to achieve. By no means am I saying that it's right or I condone it or anything like that, but like to have that kind of
psychological warfare,
to have that kind of sway is interesting. Even if it's over 70 people, I mean, you're still taking a human being that is able to think for themselves, and they literally hang on every word that you say. It's wild.
It's like any great leader.
Yeah, I mean it's a task that is not easily obtained, and once you obtain it and learn how to use it, it can be incredibly powerful. I think that's what I find most, and I think that Black Bart on the other side is from like the more, let's call, rudimentary aspect of the same thing. Like where Blackbeard was more of a fearsome type of person, you knew not to cross Black Bart because you didn't cross Black Bart. Like his word was God. Yeah, I mean, he set the standard, and he said the same thing. He just did the same thing from a more like ethical standpoint. That's weird to say. It's a weird take.
I don't know if it was ethical.
I'm saying ethical from the sense like he had a code of ethics that he lived by.
Yeah.
If you didn't follow those ethics, you were at risk for being offed. Yeah. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying ethical from like the morally ethical. I'm saying from an ethical standpoint, like that's how he lived.
I think it's standard and structure. It was very structured.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, here's a question for you. All those pirates, whose crew would you want to be on?
I'm a big fan of structure. So, I mean, if I had to make my choice, it would probably be that one. It'd probably be Black Bart's crew. Because if you do what you're supposed to do, you got nothing to worry about. Blackbeard, on the other hand, he would just off you just to make a point. You know what I mean? Like I'd rather follow the structure. I'd rather have a set of rules than like it just be fucking a free-for-all.
No, yeah, I agree with that. I agree.
I think is, and especially like, what's the alternative? You die? Like sometimes that's worth it, but at the same time, you like, I don't know, if you're coming from a situation that you're doing better than you were before, it's hard to turn away from that, as heinous as it is.
Yeah.
And that's neither right or wrong. It is what it is.
No, that's a good point.
But I think we covered a lot of good ground. I mean, like you said, there's an episode we could do on each six of these people. I mean, well, five individuals and then one pairing, but it was an interesting episode just because I sort of broke it down to you beforehand that like before we did the research, I was very green. Like I was very like one dimensional on these people, and it brought a new perspective of like what desperation can sort of bring out of you. Like if you're really that desperate for a life outside of yours and you want something quote unquote, big air quotes, huge air quotes, better from a monetary standpoint, from a notoriety standpoint, whatever that is, like how far are you willing to go? I think that's the real question with all of this stuff.
Yeah,
How do
no,
you
I
feel?
you
How do you
know,
feel about that?
I mean, I thought that this would be kind of different, but also very similar because, like we didn't even get into like buried treasure and like that type of stuff and like lore and myths and all that stuff because there's so much that you can go on the topic. I just thought that this would be something fun, growing up being a little kids, like, we always play pirates and stuff like that. Like, I just thought it'd be something cool to learn, really dive into these people and the lifestyle and everything and learn a little bit more about them. Try to, like, what made them choose that lifestyle,
Yeah, what
you
was the
know?
motivation? Whether it was like
Yeah.
being held hostage and they had no other way out, or whatever the case
Which,
is.
which some of them were that. Some of them were sick and tired of being treated like shit. Some of them were born into it. Like, just, there's no one answer to it.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely a mixed bag as how far as far as how people came into the lifestyle. Some had no choice, some did have a choice, some didn't. They was either that or you're gone type shit. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I thought it was interesting. So I know that we are trying to stay on a weekly schedule for you guys, so we're trying to pump out the episodes. Make sure if you guys did enjoy the episode, I thought it was really good. I mean, we're trying to punch these out on a weekly basis, and we're coming up with good topics. Like I said, I know we're getting a lot of listens from different places. So if you guys have anything you guys want to talk about, we're coming up with ideas by ourselves, but we'd love to hear from you guys to see what we can sort of tackle and what we sort of haven't delved into yet. But if you guys did enjoy the episode, make sure you guys follow us on Spotify. I forgot to add the plugs at the very beginning of the episode. So we're on Spotify. It's just Obscurecast is the name of the podcast. Also, we have social media handles for both Instagram and x.com. So you can follow us just at Obscurecast on both of those platforms. We're going to be posting updates. We're going to try to get back on the tipping or the clip tip as far as getting you guys some like quick snippets, like 50, 60, 70 seconds from the show, just so you can get an idea of like the pertinent points of what the episode was about or sort of what we get into. And then we also are on Apple Music as well. So if you guys are not on Spotify, we're on Apple Music as well. I know I'm trying to sort of figure out how we can get on more platforms. It's just a little bit difficult with not having accounts to those platforms, but we'll figure that out if we want to. We'll try to sort of spider web into some of the other stuff that we do. Maybe it's on the web or something like that. But I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Dan, you got anything before we finish?
No, just, like, comment, and share.
And to make sure that we'll try to, now that the holidays are sort of over, we got New Year's coming, but after the New Year's, festivities and stuff like that, we'll try to get back to at least once a week for you guys. We're trying to get back on because we had Christmas and the holidays and all that kind of stuff. So like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed the episodes. Make sure to follow us on social media, and we will see you guys on the next episode. Thanks for listening, guys.
See you guys.